Good evening, everybody. Hey, why isn't the music playing? It's going to be one of those nights, is it? There we go. Evening, Chris. Hey, Dina. Hey, Mom. Welcome, everybody.
Get ready now for 30 minutes of Super Jive in the Father High.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Christine. And Christina, Lorena, Andrea. Hey, Robert over on YouTube. Hey, Eric, Tony, Becky, Alfonso. Hey, Martin. Hey, Ginny. Hey, Alfonso, I haven't done any work yet, you know. So. Hey, Paula, Lori, Karen, and Kristen, and Gregory. Evening, everybody. Hey, Diana. Hey, Jay. Hey, Nancy in Denver. Hey, Heather. Hey, Susan. Hey, Dave and Barb in Wisconsin. Sue, Bridget, Lori, Kyle, and Pam. Hey. Ah, happy birthday, Laura. Hey, Bob. Hey, Jean. Hey, Mary, I can tell you're in Wisconsin. Hey, Dean. That being the Wisconsin drink. Hola, Miguel and Pilsen. Hey, Jacqueline. Hey, Casey. Alexandra. Hey, John. Well, there was supposed to be, but we caught him. Hey, Octavio. Hey, Rockio. No, that just means you're drinking a brandy old-fashioned. You gotta be from Wisconsin. That's a Wisconsin drink. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Rockio. Hey, Trish and Madison. Hey, Ellen. Hey, and John. Hey, Dan, Kelly, Lisa. Thanks, Paula. Hey, Pam. Hey, one of the services isn't posting. Huh.
That's what you call a powerhouse coder. Yeah, Earl Father Hines carries on now and presents Leroy Harris to sing Teacher's Pet.
Evening, Carol and Linda. Hey, Emily. Hey, April. Evening all around. Hey, Ed. Down there in Knoxville. Hey, Carolyn. Ah, Christine, thanks. Hey, Beth and Dina. Hey, David. Heather, probably coming up pretty soon, yeah. Still, I'm taking some time to try to figure out which ones work into walking tours now. And in fact, I just listed a brand new walking tour. Next Thursday night is going to be the Prairie Avenue tour. Then Sunday we'll do it as a walking tour. But it's still kind of an experiment, so we've got it's a very limited space. I had fewer people on that than I normally would. Hey, Bob. Michelle and Stephanie. Hey, happy birthday, Susan. Hey, Phoenix. Rodney, tonight I am drinking one of Jepson's single barrel bourbons that was finished in a cognac cask. It's likely to have me more toasted than usual. Hey, Dad. Tour of Waldheim Cemetery. That's tricky. Waldheim is spread out lots of different places. Forest Home would be a little bit easier. Maybe Forest Home. That'd be interesting. Cognac, you ought to know by now. Thanks, Dave and Barb. Ah, hey, Eve. Nighthawk Bourbon Barrel Cabernet Sauvignon. I like it.
Give our faithful seat a slap and carry on in jive. Hi-ho, Silver!
Hey, Gary. Sarah, that's the effing... That would be on effing Chicago that we would do that. Hey, Grandma Bell. Well, tonight might be a little bit effing, too. When I talk about Confederates, I tend to swear. So, Confederates, Copperheads, and all of those assholes. Hey, Sue, you missed some good ones. You had some great mini tours this week. We checked in with Sick Fisher, still finishing the mural. We went to the home of a guy who is said to have been one of the guys dressed as cops of the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. We went to the place where the guy who told on him was arrested. Also, we did something on Tuesday, but I don't remember what. And that's kind of the thing with these, is sometimes they end up running together in my head so much I can't keep track of what's going on. Evening, Rob. Hey, Steven in Kalamazoo, zoo, zoo. Tuesday was in Evanston, that's right. Oh yeah, it was my birthday, so we went and checked out a Hullabird Root building in Evanston and ran into James Van Osdell one while we were at it. Hey, Mona. We met Sick in person the first time last Mural Monday, on the way to see another mural. Jay, the tree issue seems to be a bit taken care of. We had this big branch fall up the neighbor's tree. Missed my car by it was on the car, but luckily a fence broke its fall. Oh, thank you, Linda. Hey, Audrey. Evening, Jan. Hey, Rocky. I'm still kind of announcing them 1 week at a time so far. But if you have a request for a particular one, go ahead and throw me a line. Hey, Lisa. Hey, Mary. Evening, Heather. Oh, geez, I just got to the spider part. Hey, Gail. Hey, Marie. Oh, the effing group chat is blowing up. They're talking about the Renfest and corsets. I'm gonna have to miss that. Thanks, Vivian. Evening, Larry. George, that's probably just wise idea. Hey, Gene, we'll give Earl Father Hines another minute or so before we get started here. Hey, Bill. Evening, Mary. Hi, Terry. Hey, Bart. Happy birthday. A lot of birthdays this week. Hey, Jacqueline. Oh, Jan, I'm sure they'll come back. Hey, Kathleen. Susan, awesome. See, the Prairie Avenue one's probably going to go fast. I don't know how many people I can realistically take on that tour, so I've got a pretty low number so far. But I have been known to walk 55 people around on Devil in the White City tours out there, so I can probably do more than like the 15 to 18 that I've got it booked for right now. Hey, Nipur. Hey, Tara. Evening, Marnie. We'll get everybody, we'll wait till there's a break in the Earl Father Hines music here. Hey, no one on YouTube. Hey, Evelyn. Evening, Deb. Hey, Kathleen. Welcome along, everybody. Mary, right now I think I have the Taylor Street one set up for 30 people, which is a bit fewer than I've had in the past. But we're easing back in here. Rose Hill Saturday will be the largest group I've had since we got back, but it's all outside. Gary, yeah, Rose Hill is sold out. But we'll do it again soon. Strangely, Rose Hill seems to sell faster than Graceland does. Mary, depends on which tour it is. Some of them have parking, others it's street parking. Yeah, we're going to have good weather on Saturday for once. That'll be nice. All right. We'll pause on Earl's Jive concert over here. And we will move on back. And I think it's time we go ahead and get started. I got 8:04. Well, hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome along once again. I am Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for many years now, over 15 of them. The author of several books, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, Smart Aleck's Guide to American History, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil. You know, his uncle was a Union veteran. But welcome along once again, everybody. I am Adam Seltzer. I'm on the History Channel, the Travel Channel, etc. all the time. In fact, we might miss a couple of mini tours this week because I have to travel to do some talking head work for an upcoming show. Anyway, I am incredibly famous. You should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. Today we are going to be talking about Camp Douglas, Chicago's Confederate prisoner of war camp, and the plot to break all the prisoners free, destroy Chicago, and mess up the election of 1864. It was an insurrection plot that didn't come out to anything. This isn't officially one of the effing Chicago tours where we swear and wear whatever the hell we want, but I do tend to swear a little bit when I'm talking about Confederates. Those assholes. So just to be warned, this is not necessarily an adult tour, but there may be some adult themes. Right, so let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to start out with some visual footage. Here we are on 31st Street near Lakeshore Drive, just east of MLK. Now, right about here in the 1930s, there was a jazz club called the Lincoln Gardens. Louis Armstrong very probably smoked his first joint on these grounds in the early 20s, and then was seldom sober again for the rest of his life. But just half a century or so before that, this got its start. This was originally all land owned by Stephen A. Douglas. The other half of the Lincoln-Douglas debates will move over here like this. Now, here's the thing about Stephen A. Douglas. When he was a senator, he advocated heavily to get the railroads to Chicago. That allowed Chicago to become a big city. Chicago becoming a big city is the reason that Abraham Lincoln was able to beat him in the election eventually. We held the 1860 Republican Convention was here in Chicago. It's unlikely that Lincoln would have been nominated anywhere else. I mean, this guy, he was a popular speaker. He'd been a junior house nobody a decade before. He was not the kind of guy who normally got nominated for president. We'd had a couple of presidents by then who weren't born rich, but by the time they became president, they were military heroes. They were governors. Lincoln was still just a lawyer from Illinois without much of a background. So, hey, by advocating the railroads, Stephen A. Douglas quite literally dug his own grave politically. That allowed Lincoln to be nominated. Lincoln kicked his butt in 1860. And elsewhere on the property now, on the old land, is now his tomb. You can walk right into the crypt, and the sarcophagus has brochures about him set up on top of the sarcophagus. Just tacky as hell, but Douglas kind of sucked anyway. However, in the middle of that election in 1860, he realized at once that Lincoln was going to win after some regional elections took place and decided to just stop campaigning and try to convince the South not to secede after all. It was really his finest moment. He redeemed himself a fair bit in that amount. And then his land became a Civil War training camp just briefly before it became a Confederate prisoner of war camp. Now here's a bit of a map of the area. So we'd have been on the right-hand side is where we just showed over here. It would have gone along the edge here. Here's a full map of where it is. And you look right on the right-hand side there. This is tilted to the side from what we were seeing right there. You can also see this thing that says H. Graves. Now, everybody who looks at this map, including myself, the first time they see it is like, ooh, that must be the cemetery where they buried all the guys who died of cholera. Really, not a lot of people would have been buried on the spot. Most of them were moved up to the old city cemetery or taken by the medical schools. Really, that space is the home of Henry Graves, pictured right here, who lived in this little house. If you look over on the left-hand side, you see this one section with all these nice trees and a little house. That's Henry Graves' home. Henry Graves just happened to live on the land at the time that the prison was built around it and didn't want to move. So for a few years there, he just lived right in the middle of a Confederate prison camp. And he's well known around here anyway. We talk about him on a great many of my tours. He was the guy who commissioned the Eternal Silence Monument for his grave. Or at least put aside the money that allowed it to be built. I don't think he actually had much say in designing it, except that he did say in his will he wished it to be the most substantial and imposing monument the funds set aside would allow. So this became our Confederate prisoner of war camp. A lot of Confederate prisoners were captured and taken up here to Chicago. Over the course of the war, something like 15,000 prisoners were held here at various times. And it wasn't a pleasant place to be. Everywhere you looked, there would have been guys freezing to death, starving to death, dying of dysentery, cholera, all of those great diseases. Whether it was worse than any other Civil War prison camp kind of depends on who you ask. People, mainly Confederate supporters, love to say this was absolutely the worst prison in the whole Civil War. Others say, well, it was bad, but it wasn't necessarily as bad as like Andersonville Prison down south. Now, among the earliest prisoners to be taken here, it was bad early on. One of the first guys brought in was a Confederate soldier named Henry Morton Stanley, who really, as soon as he was captured, switched sides. This guy ended up fighting for the Confederate Army, the Union Army, and the Union Navy over the course of the war. And he wrote, "Our buildings were swarming with vermin. The dust sweepings were alive with them. The men began to suffer from disorders. Dysentery and typhus began to rage. Day by after day, my company steadily diminished, and every morning I had to see them carried in their blankets to the hospital whence none ever returned. Exhumed corpses could not have presented anything more hideous." Now, Henry Morton Stanley is much better known now for his expedition to find the missionary David Livingstone. He's the one who famously said Dr. Livingston, I presume. Or at least we think he said, at least he claims to have said that. But down around here, we'll go over to the side, just kind of touring around the general vicinity right here. Now, most of the people here, I tend to feel bad for them. I mean, I think they should be tearing down every single Confederate monument. The people, they can grind them into powder. The people who love them so much are welcome to snort lines of them off of my ass later on. But I feel bad for the prisoners. These were mostly just kids. A lot of them were in the army because they'd been drafted. I think very few of them, really, it was the politics so much as the fact that there was a war on that ended up with them in the army. Plus, you have to look at what they had been force-fed, all the ways that they had been manipulated to and lied lied to really their entire lives, and just how poorly informed most of them were about the issues and what was really going on in the country at the time. For instance, there was a survey taken at Camp Douglas among the prisoners there, and it was noted here, for the purpose of showing the means and agencies by which the rebellion was excited, it is sufficient to say that a considerable portion, perhaps a majority of the prisoners at Camp Douglas devoutly believed that Mr. Lincoln, the president, is a Negro. These guys had never seen a picture of Abraham Lincoln. Many of them had probably never seen a drawing of him. Now, these weren't hard to come by. He was a very well-known figure. He had his picture taken about as much as anybody in those days. But these kids lived off in rural farms someplace. They weren't getting much data other than what they were told. And if you go through and read their newspapers about what they were told, it's pretty much horrifying. I tend to feel kind of bad for the kids. I mean, many of them who survived got better later on. We'll also continue just moving around here a little bit. Now, as you can see, there's not a whole lot left to see. Everything was torn down a few years after the war. There have been some archaeological expeditions over the years. Down on the southern end here is 33rd and Rhodes. And for a while, there was housing built here. Now the housing is mostly gone, other than the high-rises that came in later. And right about down here at 33rd, this is about where the entrance and where Henry Graves' property would have been. Right about in here. General Benjamin Sweet took over in May of 1864, ordered more buildings to be built, more hospitals, and tried to bring in as much care as possible, but it was still not great. His daughters used to wander around the place singing, "Are you all dead yet? Are you all dead yet? We've got your quinine, we've got your quinine." Clearly delightful little girls. But there was also the issue that they got more and more crowded because they weren't doing prisoner transfers. In normal circumstances, the two armies would trade prisoners back and forth, but Lincoln refused to do that until the southern states started treating black soldiers who had been kidnapped as regular soldiers, not just people that they could take into slavery, which is what they were doing, if they didn't just shoot them dead. So until they agreed to play fair, Lincoln wouldn't play fair back. Now, meanwhile, down south, Jefferson Davis, here with the Confederate cabinet, who did not last long as a nation and may have been a total bunch of dicks, but I will admit they knew a thing or two about looking good. Jefferson Davis knew that in Chicago there was a lot of Copperhead sentiment. The Copperheads were the Northerners who really supported the South. One guy who used to come to see him now and then was a guy by the name of Thomas Hines. Came to meet with Jefferson Davis in February of 1864 to talk all about the great Copperhead sentiment that he had heard about in Chicago, particularly festered by Wilbur F. Story, the publisher of the Chicago Times, the local Copperhead paper. This guy comes up a lot on our tours. Now, here's something he had published about a year before when the Emancipation Proclamation took effect. "History does not make us acquainted with so deplorable a failure as this administration. It has never demanded men but were forthcoming than it desired, and has never asked for money but its lap was filled to overflowing," etc., etc. Really what he was saying was the Emancipation Proclamation was the last straw for him. He said that there was no deed so wicked in the annals of history. So, when coming through town, Ambrose Burnside ended up in Chicago and shut the Chicago Times down altogether because he had gotten so nasty in its sentiment. Abraham Lincoln himself intervened and said, no, freedom of the press, he's allowed to be an asshole if he wants to. Lincoln may in fact have used those exact words. Wilbur F. Story celebrated being allowed back to publish again by publishing a parody of the song The Battle Cry of Freedom with lines like, "For the rights of the white men, hurrah boys, hurrah." Man, I hate that fucker. So Thomas Hines wrote a big report to Jefferson Davis saying there's all this stuff going on in Chicago. Why don't you let me get a little band together and we'll cause some trouble in Chicago? He even reported that he had gone to D.C. He's like, it's so easy to be a spy. I walked right into D.C., shook hands with Abraham Lincoln myself. Probably he didn't, but he was very persuasive. Jefferson Davis agreed to bankroll his expedition. Exactly to what extent is kind of up to debate. But he ended up going up to Toronto. Toronto was this place called the Queen's Hotel. The Queen's Hotel was kind of like Casablanca. This was a gathering place for Confederate spies. It was a gathering place for Union spies, all about 24 hours by train away from Chicago. Members of both armies and supporters were just constantly like trying to buy worthless information off of each other around here. But among those who were hanging around were a bunch of Confederate escapees and exiles, including Clement Vandingham of Ohio. This guy had been in the House of Representatives, but he was convicted of using his position to aid and comfort the rebels, so they kicked his ass out of Congress like they should have. He was exiled. And while in Canada, he tried to run for governor of Ohio in absentia, but he lost, so he joined a group called the Sons of Liberty. You know, these traitor groups always make a big deal out of calling themselves patriots and having names like the Sons of Liberty. So this was a group with branches all over the place. They had previously been known as like the Knights of the Golden Circle. But now he started recruiting more people while hanging out up here in the Queen's Hotel. It was also here that he met with Thomas Hines to start plotting about what to do in Chicago. And meanwhile, there was also a guy named George Grenfell, who was an English soldier of fortune, got involved with them as well. Now, the Sons of Liberty had an active branch in Chicago who met initially at the site of a place called the Invincible Club at Clark and Monroe, then moved to a location of their own clubhouse at Randolph and Dearborn, right about over here. Now, among the people here was Buckner Morris, who was our second mayor here in Chicago, and a guy by the name of Charles Walsh, a Chicago man who had been formerly a candidate for sheriff, but got radicalized sometime during the Civil War. Now, most of these meetings, all they really did was talk about how much the Union sucked, how nice the South was, how keen they thought slavery was, and how every paper except the Chicago Times was fake news. We know this because there were a lot of spies in their ranks. There was one guy named Dr. I.W. Ayers who wrote multiple books about it. A couple other guys managed to weasel their way in. They had a whole lot of top secret initiation rites and secret codes and handshakes and stuff, but it doesn't seem to have been very hard to get into the group. Dr. I.W. Ayers had no problem whatsoever. But eventually they started talking about the fact that there were all these Confederates here in Chicago down at Camp Douglas. Clearly something could be done with those people. And Buckner Morris, our former mayor, was overheard saying that if we could break those prisoners out, we could send those abolitionists to hell in a handbasket. And this is a footnote in history in and of itself. So far as anybody knows, it is the first time anybody used the phrase hell in a handbasket. I very much doubt that it was actually the first, but it's the first recorded instance that anyone has ever been able to find. And that was reported not only in Dr. Ayers' book, but also in reports on the trial that came later, the transcript of the trial when these guys eventually got caught and sent to trial. But Charles Walsh, meanwhile, said, hey, I used to be a candidate for sheriff. I know how to drill soldiers. Tell you what, I will drill them. If you can get together an army, I will get the people drilled. So the plan, which they put together with Thomas Hines over various meetings in the Queen's Hotel up in Ontario, was to say, here's what we'll do. The Democratic National Convention is meeting in Chicago this summer. So what we'll do is we'll get all of our people together then we'll break things out of Camp Douglas if things don't go our way. So the Democratic National Convention, 1864, was preceded by a pretty bad time for the Union. General B.J. Sweet had taken control of Camp Douglas along with his daughters, the Singers. He did as much as he could to try to make things better there, but there just weren't a lot of funds for it because things weren't going all that well for the Union right then. We had just had the Battle of the Crater. This was a thing in Petersburg featuring a lot of Chicago people such as Colonel John Bross and the U.S. 29th Colored Troops, the black unit that was recruited in Illinois. The idea was they were going to blow up a Confederate fort in Petersburg, Virginia from underneath, But then when they rushed into the crater that it was created by the explosion, it ended up being just a turkey shoot. The Union was absolutely crushed. The Confederates shot most of the prisoners, but others they marched through the streets so that the people of Petersburg, Virginia would see here's white soldiers marching with black soldiers just to get them really riled up. And the fact that we had lost this battle was bad, including the loss of John Bross, whose brother William Bross was a publisher here in Chicago. William Bross, who will walk up to his grave here, said, "The gloom that pervaded the whole country was especially thick and murky in Chicago. The copperheads were venomous. Whisperings of blood running through the streets ankle deep, and lampposts bearing black Republican fruit were in the air." Now, meanwhile, his office on Michigan Avenue looked right over the site where the Democratic Convention was going to be held. In case you've been following Dinesh D'Souza or some shithead like that, in those days, the Democrats always referred to themselves as the conservatives. They thought of the Republicans as the radicals. In a very broad term, the Republicans were the liberals back then, and the Democrats were the conservatives. This being very broad about it, but when I'm reading 1860s stuff, I almost always side with the Republicans. When I read modern stuff, I never do, but, that's just called not being too incredibly tribalist. So, he said that he would watch these people. "I often sat at my window on Michigan Avenue and saw the filthy stream of degraded humanity swagger along to the wigwam on the lake shore and wondered how the city could be saved from burning and plunder. But we knew that General Sweet had let me move him up here. General Sweet had small squads of men with signs and passwords in the alleys ready to concentrate at the point of danger in a minute." And meanwhile, just up Michigan Avenue from here, this would have been about where Grant Park is. But just up the road, about where the Carbide and Carbon building is now, a little bit over from that on Michigan Avenue, was a hotel called the Richmond House. And here in the Richmond House had gathered Clement Vallandigham, Thomas Hines, and Charles Walsh once again thinking, all right, we're going to do this. It's time that we put our plans into action. But meanwhile, Hines found that though Walsh had been talking a big deal about how he was going to get all these troops ready to go, he hadn't actually done anything yet. So, but they all decided, they're going to nominate McClellan. Lincoln doesn't have a chance. I guess we don't really need to do anything right now. So they just decided they would let things play out. So meanwhile, fall of 1864, though, there were some reverses. This is the burning of Atlanta. This began the Great March through Georgia with Sherman and his troops, which put the Union in a much better situation. So Charles Walsh started actually recruiting people and saying that he was drilling people. And according to Captain Shirley, who later said, "After the war, I questioned some of the most intelligent in reference to this supposed conspiracy. They told me they were divided into companies," these are the prisoners, "regiments and brigades, and confidently expected officers from the South to command them, and their intention was to destroy Chicago." But meanwhile, back at Camp Douglas, back at the camp, there was a guy by the name of John Shanks. This isn't him. I can't find a picture of John Shanks anywhere. But John Shanks was a Union man in Texas, but he'd been drafted into the Confederate Army. Got himself captured, immediately went to General Sweet, said, "I think this Confederate stuff is crap. Why don't you make me a spy?" So, hard to tell whether they could actually recruit him or not. So they decided to send him up to a house near Madison and Wells, just to test out how well this stuff worked. And this was the home of Buckner S. Morris, the former mayor of Chicago. So he went out here and pretended that he was a Confederate who had just escaped from Camp Douglas and needed some help. Morris made a big thing of saying, "Well, I can't really do anything to help you here. But here, talk to my wife. She can." His wife was a Southerner, a very big Confederate supporter. Said, "I have to keep my hands clean and not break any laws." But his wife gave him some names and addresses, including sending him to a place called, let's see, I thought I had it here. I may have lost the video, but just down the block was a clothing store that was working with, it was part of the high command of the Sons of Liberty, helped him up with clothes, helped him out with getting money, started talking about them, and they told him, "Yes, we've got plans. We're going to break the prisoners out. We're going to cut the telegraph wires. Then we are going to go straight to the courthouse, stuff the ballot boxes, and if that doesn't work, we're going to burn the city." But it was all coming back on for election time. Now, one place we passed by at Graceland quite a bit is up on top of the G.M. Stevens tomb is the grave of a woman named Ann Hosmer. She was working at the Soldiers' Home at the time, and looking back on this later, she said the day of the election was much dreaded by all. Rumors were that the city would be burned. Those were days of great anxiety, and I felt as though we were living on a volcano ready to burst at any moment. And she herself was a particular target from running the Soldiers' Home. She had run afoul of Wilbur F. Story. Somebody had come in there from the Chicago Times, and she said, I would rather cut off my hand than work for the Chicago Times, which led Wilbur F. Story to do a whole rant about the intolerant abolitionists. But meanwhile, Wilbur F. Story, as the election approached, really got on a hobby horse about the idea that Lincoln was going to cheat, that Lincoln was going to steal the election from McClellan. Here's this plots of old Abe to carry the election in Illinois. None but loyal men will be allowed to vote. Horrible sufferings of the Union prisoners. Old Abe might release them, but will not. We've spoken about why already. And then there was the conspiracy of this administration. Every day accumulates evidence of a gigantic and widespread conspiracy on the part of the administration to carry the coming election. We all know how the ballot boxes were manipulated in Indiana. They were not in the recent gubernatorial election. And later indications show that what was done in Indiana is but the preliminary operations of an attempt to control the presidential election at all hazards. This was a big lie. Meanwhile, he was quoting people as saying, if Lincoln's election is based on the votes of Louisiana, Tennessee, or Arkansas, his inauguration should be resisted. He said things like the Army vote, the abolition plot at Baltimore and Washington, frauds by the administrationalists. And a new abolition dodge, rebel prisoners will be released so they can vote for Lincoln. He was really on about this shit. But meanwhile, inside the Richmond House, here's how the Richmond House looked. Thomas Hines was back in town. George Grenfell, the soldier of fortune, was hanging around. And Clement Vallandigham was back once again. He had gone to the DNC really quite openly. He was officially exiled, but he was still walking around and making speeches. Half the people would boo him and half the people would cheer him. Kind of stuff you hear about now, even now. So they all got together at this hotel and figured out exactly what their plan was. They had stashed guns in various houses nearby Camp Douglas where their supporters were. The plan was that Hines would lead an attack on one side of the fort. Grenfell would be in charge of attacking the city. Several soldiers were stationed in the hotel. Trouble is, one of the soldiers in the hotel was really John T. Shanks, the Union spy. So he reported all of this back to General Sweet. Now, theoretically, if you look at the sheer numbers, there were only so many guards stationed at Camp Douglas. There were thousands of prisoners there, and who knows how many copperheads in the city ready to help them. Theoretically, it shouldn't have been too hard for them to overcome the guards. Except for the fact that these soldiers were sick, they were malnourished, they were cold, these were Southerners who wouldn't have been used to Chicago in November by any means. The sheer notion that they could have been armed and really taken over a city, if you really look at the conditions, it's almost absurd, but they were certainly planning it. So, having gotten the information from John T. Shanks, General Sweet sprung into action. First place that he went was a neighborhood where the neighborhood of Groveland is now, one of Chicago's oldest neighborhoods, in the old portion of Douglas's grounds. It's a really cool neighborhood to go walking through now. If you're ever around here, right off of the edge, right across from the entrance, was a house owned by a guy by the name of John Walsh. It was found to contain a whole lot of guns. The troops broke into here, found where all the weapons were. Thomas Hines was there at the time, but managed to escape because he was hiding in a mattress at the time. Meanwhile, a couple of the other people were here at Walsh's house, where he had been, at least claimed that he had been drilling people over here on West Adams. Another guy was hanging out at Dr. Edwards' house. But there were people stationed all over. This was the Sons of Liberty meeting. There was a lot of stuff stashed over in there. They had people stationed. That is, if they were able to break things out and cause enough chaos and cut the telegraph wires, they could have really done a lot of damage, even if arming the troops didn't work out that well. But they were all captured pretty quickly. It was even in time to be in the evening papers. Charles Walsh made a confession almost immediately, details of the plan, the Poles to be invaded, the prisoners at Camp Douglas to be set free, a general sack of the city intended, plunder, rapine, fire, bloodshed in the streets of Chicago, the city to be laid in ruins. Now, the Copperheads up north immediately said that this was what we would now call a false flag. They said that the whole thing was totally fake. It's kind of an evergreen headline. The Rock Island Argus published an article said, Republicans making asses of themselves, a ridiculous electioneering trick, last card of the desperate shottyites. That was a word I got really excited about when I saw. I figured that was some kind of reference to some politician or some particular belief that was kind of forgotten today, like loco focos, as they used to call some factions. But no, it just means those who are attracted to things that are shoddy. The Chicago Times, meanwhile, said the arms found in the house were either planted there by abolition plotters, which is very much the 1864 version of saying, oh no, it wasn't us who did this, it must have really been Antifa. But General Sweet put out an order saying, okay, don't be too worried about this stuff. We will do whatever it takes to suppress a riot. It is not dangerous for you to come vote. The good people of Chicago will dismiss all apprehensions, go to the polls, and cast their ballots for the candidate of their choice without excitement and in the spirit of cheerful obedience to the law, and aid the authorities to preserve the public peace and the good name of our city. So the election did in fact go off without a hitch, as everybody expected to by then. Abraham Lincoln won. Though, of course, the Chicago Times didn't quite buy it. Here's their article the next day. Their victory. Misters Abolitionists, you have won the election. We shall not now inquire by what agencies. A few days will reveal them, and disclose also the appropriate actions to be taken by your opponents in retaliation thereto. In other words, he assumed that they had somehow stolen it from General McClellan, who, as a general, had kind of sat on his butt for a couple of years just to make Lincoln look bad so he could run against him. But most of the people were brought to trial. The trial was set up in Washington, D.C. Well, initially they were held at a church called Trinity Church in Chicago, here at Madison and Adams area. Then eventually taken to Washington, D.C., where they were charged with conspiring in violation of laws of war to lay waste and destroy the city of Chicago. Now, Buckner Morris, this is where it was quoted a couple of times as saying he was going to send the abolitionists to hell in a handbasket. He didn't really deny this, but they couldn't find anything they could specifically pin on him. His wife was exiled back to the South. She was not allowed to come back to the Union states, but Buckner Morris himself was acquitted. Now, check my notes here really quickly. Hines had escaped. He was continued to be escaped. Grenfell, the soldier of fortune, was sent to the Dry Tortugas prison. This was an island prison about 70 miles from Key West and out down in the Florida Keys. It was used as a military prison during the war. One of his fellow prisoners was Samuel Mudd, the guy who set John Wilkes Booth's leg as he was trying to escape. Grenfell himself tried to escape from Dry Tortugas prison and presumably died in the attempt. He was never found again, was never heard from again, but there are those who wondered if he actually did escape, including Samuel Mudd. Now, one of the major plotters who was not captured was Clement Vallandigham. Clement Vallandigham, though, went on to a career as a lawyer. His banishment was canceled, but while working as a lawyer a few years after all of this, he decided to demonstrate that how his client might have accidentally shot himself to death. So he took a gun that he assumed wasn't loaded to demonstrate how he might bend over and shoot himself in the abdomen. Demonstrated a little too well. That gun was loaded, he shot himself, and he died. He did get his prisoner off of the hook, though. Now, just one other thing that I want to cover with as a kind of an aftermath thing. As the Civil War ended and Reconstruction began, this all just kind of faded into history. Now and then people would reminisce about having been a part of the plot, but it was just one of those forgotten things, partly because so many people made so much noise, and continue to make so much noise about the idea that it never really happened, it was just something abolitionists cooked up to make the Confederates look bad. It just kind of faded into history over time. But Right here at Rose Hill Cemetery is the grave of Benjamin Sweet, which was placed there by his daughters. First of all, there was his daughter Ava. These were the two kids who used to go around singing, "Are you all dead yet? Are you all dead yet?" Now, after the war, General Sweet became the paymaster. His daughter worked with him and learned the business, and after he died, she took over. Grant appointed her as paymaster, and she was in charge of making pension payments under several different presidents after this. Meanwhile, her sister, the other girl who went around singing, was Winifred Sweet, who became a journalist herself. She had a front row seat at the trial of Harry Thaw for the murder of architect Stanford White. And something I always felt was interesting, especially here, is General Sweet is right next to Wilbur F. Story. It's like they've got him there right where he can keep an eye on Old Man Story to this day. But that, in a nutshell, is the story of the 1864 insurrection here in Chicago. Buckner Smith Morris, we found on one of our earlier tours. He's on the other side of the cemetery in an unmarked grave. Quick plug for some of the upcoming things. So Saturday is a Rose Hill Cemetery in-person tour. That one is sold out. But on Sunday, we'll do Graceland and Rose Hill Expanded. We'll do the virtual version that includes stuff that we can't really walk to on most of the walking tours, usually just because it's too far off of the beaten path or too far off of the normal routes. Then next Thursday, a week from tonight, we're bringing back the Prairie Avenue walking tour, virtual tour, as a preview for trying it in person next Sunday. So next weekend's in-person tour, Saturday night, will be the Dark History of Taylor Street. First time we've brought that one back in person this year. Followed on Sunday by a brand new kind of an experiment for Prairie Avenue, Splendor and Scandals. It's one that I really loved putting together as a virtual tour. Can't wait to do it again. And by doing the in-person one right after, I'll only have to relearn all of the data and facts just the once. So lots of great stuff coming up here. You can get in-person tickets at MysteriousChicago.com. Now, should you, instead of a ticket or in addition to, want a Mysterious Chicago t-shirt, sweatshirt, flask, shot glass, mug, etc., go to cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago like these fine Georgia voters right here. cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago. And with that, everybody, we will put Earl Father Hines back on and just hang out like we always do. Thanks a lot for joining me, everybody. This has been the Insurrection of 1864. Good guys won. Thanks, everybody. I thought that one was going to run long. It kind of didn't. Thanks, Audrey. Thanks, Deanne. Thanks, Valerie. Thank you, Gary. Thanks, John. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Octavio. The Adventures of Miles. Miles is presently sitting in a box that is way too small for him. Miles is, you probably see him there sitting next to his toys. There are 3 boxes. One's too big, one's just right. He's in the one that's too small. I bet I can get Miles moving. Miles, want to play a little? I get out the cat dancer toy that Layla got for him. This thing. He goes nuts for this thing. That'll get him moving in a minute anyway. Thanks, Betsy.
Give our faithful seat a slap and carry on in jive.
Thanks, Dave and Barb.
Silver.
Come say hi to the people, Miles. There we go. See, if I put the thing down, Miles will come moving around. Kristen, this one particularly seems like I had to read a lot of trial transcripts and stuff. Rocky, yes, the Venmo is working again. Oh, thank you, Ann. Okay, Giordana, I don't have any tattoos whatsoever. But I'm not hard to run into at bagel places. Typo for typhoid. Now, one thing about Rose Hill is they've got a little more parking than Graceland does. So we should probably be okay. But also, the street parking at Graceland at Rose Hill is a snap.
Well, let's stop and have a little Father Hines melody of the Colorado sunset. Aye.
Thanks for noticing, Pamela. I said I got some filming next week, so I gotta look my best. If anybody's new, there is also a there's also a page called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club on Facebook. Heather, the Sunday morning virtual tour will be, this week will be Graceland and Rose Hill cemeteries. Next Sunday, I don't know yet. Still kind of experimenting how to move things forward, and I also need a couple of days just to regroup and go over my notes and find some of the which ones translate to walking tours, etc., and just remember all these stories. Just walking around today, like, I know I did a tour about this place. I know there was some kind of murder story in this building, but some of the details I just didn't have a chance to really let sink in yet. At the end, I was so young. Haunted history, man. That was like 10 years ago. Ah, Lee, that sucks. I've been using... Sarah, no, I don't have any more any news about the Graceland book yet. I should send them a note. Jocelyn, we just did the Gold Coast tour virtually a few weeks ago. In person, I want to try that one, but it's tricky. I don't know how many people I can take at once. There's something up my nose. This is driving me nuts. Only I guarantee you, as soon as I have any pre-order info, I will let you know. Have a good night, Eleanor. Softball team sounds good, but I've still got some sore limbs from the batting cages. Those are muscles one does not normally exercise as an adult. Amy, you got a tattoo right before the wedding? That's just cursing it. Miles, why don't you get into this box? This one you can fit in. Here, try this one. This one's a little bigger. See, the small one you broke. It's all in pieces now. Now, classic Chicago softball does not allow gloves. Most softball leagues here do use gloves now, but you'll still see like the old guys come up to you, like showing this like gnarled towel and say, "You see this, son? This is the hand of a softball player."
Concert by Earl Father Hines and his orchestra, so now it can be told it's reaching you from the new Grand Terrace on Chicago's south side, where the couples are gaily dancing here in the cool atmosphere to this jive of Earl Father Hines. Yeah, but now comes Leroy Harris to sing Now It Can Be Told.
That's an old guy Chicago accent. They all think they're tough, though.
The world may know the sentimental story, the greatest romance they ever knew, waiting to unfold. Now it can be told.
Miles has been like pushing the cat dancer towards me regularly lately. He loves this thing. If he hasn't gotten enough playing in before bed, he will get me out of bed to play some more. Night, Susan. I don't know how you guys can see that, but he's doing some pretty good jumps tonight. Hey, Octavio's wife. Hey, Flor, happy birthday. There's like a lot of July babies out there.
Father Hines, and you have Beside a Moonlit Stream. The tropic breeze is blowing, eyes with love light glowing, beside a moonlit stream. Faintly, the waterfall is singing, loving arms are clinging, beside a moonlit stream. My heart is a tom-tom.
Yeah, I've never gotten the tattoo. I have one idea for one that I might want to get, but I don't want it that bad. I want Gonzo from Muppet Babies dressed as a knight and riding a chicken like Gonzo Quixote. Ginny, yeah, as soon as we got some traveling stuff coming up, so we're waiting to get a new kitten, but we will get another one. in a couple of months. Because, yeah, Miles needs somebody to play with. Good jumps. What was the reaction in Chicago to Lincoln's assassination? Devastation, really. Even the Chicago Times started being a lot nicer about Lincoln after that. They gave up their criticism more or less completely. Even then they kind of admitted, well, he's gotten better lately. But they also said, well, as bad as John Wilkes Booth surely was, you know John Brown is just as bad. What about John Brown?
Little kiss at twilight.
Yeah, being an only cat, I don't think is suiting Miles that much. He wants attention a lot. Good night, Lynn. Ooh, a Pullman pullover. I've got a couple of experimental designs for a Pullman shirt. I haven't found one that come up with one that I really like yet. But yeah, it is going to be about wintertime, isn't it? I like to think that it's about wintertime now. I don't like summer. Yeah, we're waiting. Aiden's with his dad for the summer, but once he's back, he asks us to wait until he gets back so we can help pick a kitten out, and I think that's a great idea. Oh. I think I have an idea for where I want to do Find a Great Friday tomorrow. It's going to be a bit of a commute. Further away than I normally go these days. It would have been easy, like, early on. There wasn't as much traffic as more and more people were staying home, but now that people are out again and the traffic's a lot worse. I wouldn't make mysterious Chicago Crocs, man. I mean, I tried wearing Crocs 1 or 2 days. My dad had been saying they're the most comfortable things he'd ever worn. And I like, what do you normally do? Just tape some knives to your feet? Okay, over in the effing group chat, I've only seen like the last one, but Layla just said, out for an elephant, but $175, so I ain't getting it. I really need the context of this. Oh yeah, Octavio. That would be like a prime breeding ground for feral cats out there by Halloween. You guys have seen Halloween Leather. We went out there for Mural Monday one time. Not only is the whole building a sick fisher, but there's also all these other murals painted around there, by the river. I think it was back in, like, January? Alright, Cindy, enjoy the sharks. If anybody is just joining us, the tour was an hour ago. It was 8 o'clock Central. So now we're just kind of in the post-tour hangout. But as soon as I log off, it'll be up on the video section of Mysterious Chicago very shortly thereafter. Yeah, Octavio was there. And I was like keeping my distance because my neighbor was having a COVID scare, so I was kind of worried that I was having a COVID scare. Go back to the Benny. I may have been drinking too much to remember that. Remember that phrase. Oh, yeah, the Benny Goodman. Yeah. When I switched to doing things on Restream, so it'll also be on YouTube and Twitch, YouTube was hitting me with copyright stuff for it. So we're on Earl Father Hines right now. And this is also recorded live in Chicago. This is recorded live in the Grand Terrace Ballroom, where a beauty shop is now, down in Bronzeville. Carolyn, I feel your pain. Well, you know, maybe one of these days soon I'll bring back the Benny too. So I love that Benny. But alright, looks like people are starting to log off, and we're about to the end of the Earl Father Hines show, so I think it's time to do one more quick plug of the upcoming events. Graceland and Rose Hill Cemetery tours will be a virtual one on Sunday morning. A week from today, we're doing Prairie Avenue virtually. Then next Saturday, Dark History on Taylor Street, followed by the in-person edition of Prairie Avenue. You can get in-person tickets on MysteriousChicago.com. Prairie Avenue is going fast, and there's only a limited number available to begin with. But once again, everybody, thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer from Mysterious Chicago Tours. I will see some of you on Saturday morning for Rose Hill Cemetery. And others I will be seeing tomorrow morning for Find a Grave Friday right here on Mysterious Chicago. So until then, thanks a lot, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Stay safe, stay strong, stay warm, stay dry, but not too warm, not too dry. and of course, stay spooky. Have a great night, everyone.